Alrighty guys, what's up? So today we are in Ukraine actually, but that's not the topic of the video. We're going to be talking about the differences between Latin America and Eastern Europe. As a lot of you know, who've been following my channel for a while, most of my content has been around Latin America because that's where, where I've been for the most part of the last, I think 2 or 3 years now. Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, pretty much any major Latin American country I've spent time in, and I know it relatively well enough to know how good it is as an option for a digital nomad. And so in this video today, we're going to be comparing, now that I'm here in Eastern Europe, some of the major key differences between Latin America and Eastern Europe. We're going to be talking about the cost of living differences, the cultural differences, the dating differences, maybe like stuff like the food differences and stuff like that. We're going to be talking about all that in this video, and I hope you enjoy. So getting straight into it, I'm here, like I said, now I'm in Ukraine, but this isn't the first time I've been here. I've also been in Poland 3 times. I've been in Hungary and a few other Eastern European countries. A lot of you guys who are digital nomads, there's really like a lot of times like 3 major spots that a lot of you guys end up going to, which is Latin America, Eastern Europe, or Southeast Asia. I don't have a ton of interest in the third one, but maybe I will someday. But there's a lot of guys who like those two because in some ways there's some similarities. And so we're going to be talking about the similarities and differences. What are some of the pros of one and what are some of the cons of the other? So getting straight into it, I would say that overall, some of the ways that they're similar is that they are both more traditional cultures where men are sort of more men, women are more women. There's not as much of the political woke stuff that is going on. Overall, I think that's one thing that a lot of guys definitely find that they like quite a bit, is the fact that there is a bit more of a traditional way of life in a lot of ways when you spend time in some of these countries versus some of the more wacky stuff that you see in America with the gender stuff and all that. They're both typically being known as places that are relatively cheap. So if you are able to, if you're a digital nomad and you earn in dollars, then you're able to take your current kind of quality of life, your standard of living, by changing your location, by going to a different country. And also while doing that, a lot of times the food can be better than the United States, the women can be better than the United States. In some circumstances, the weather could be better. So it's like, it really can be quite appealing for some of you guys who might be drawn to this lifestyle, as a lot of you guys know. First off, getting into it, the cost of living, I would say this is one of the things that changes a lot over the past couple of years. Latin America is very varied in the cost of living. Colombia, for the most part, has stayed relatively the same. It's gone up a little bit over the years, but pretty much anywhere in the world has gone up. Argentina is very expensive right now. I'm making this video in April 2025. As of right now, it's very expensive, but a year and a half ago, it was cheaper than even Colombia. And Colombia is like half or sometimes even a third of prices in the United States. So the situation in Argentina can change a bit. Also, Brazil is going down in cost of living at the expense of their economy. And they're experiencing a lot of inflation. And so for people with dollars, Brazil's actually getting cheaper. It's actually a better deal right now than Argentina. And like I said, just a year ago, that wasn't the case. Comparing cost of living can be a bit tricky, really, depending on what country. But Poland is, a lot of people from Poland might not want you to call Poland Eastern Europe. They would want you to call it Central Europe. It was a part of the Eastern Bloc and everything like that under Soviet influence after the war. So for the sake of this video, we're going to call it Eastern Europe, even though that might piss off some Polish people. Apologies. Poland is the most Western, I would say, Eastern European or Central European country. Honestly, it has some of the best benefits because the cost of living is still relatively low. Right now, Poland is cheaper than Argentina. It might not be cheaper than Colombia. It might not be cheaper than Brazil, but it is definitely cheaper than Argentina, at least from when I left. Ukraine, where I'm at right now, I'm not recommending you go to Ukraine because there is a war going on. But for your information, Ukraine is even a lot cheaper than Poland. It's probably on the level of Colombia and Brazil in prices like that. But the further east you go, obviously, the cheaper it gets, like Romania, Moldova, or some of these cities can really be quite affordable. I think Airbnbs are around $1,000 a month, which is somewhat comparable to what you'd see in Argentina. In Argentina, the prices for Airbnbs are one of the only things that have remained relatively low, but everything else is really expensive. Whereas in Poland, sometimes finding like a long-term or medium-term can be more expensive on average, but the food you buy and everything like that really is going to be too much. As far as cost of living goes, it's pretty comparable. You're not going to see a massive difference depending on what part of Latin America you're in and what part of Eastern Europe you're in. But generally, you're getting the best deal. One of the things I really like about Eastern Europe versus Latin America is that in Eastern Europe, you have things that are relatively less expensive, but it's safe. In Latin America, like, it's a very affordable place and everything like that. But especially as a white guy, you have to worry about getting robbed. You have to worry about some guys worry about going on Tinder dates and getting scope malined or whatever it is. So you have to actually like worry for your safety. Whereas in Poland, there's not really a lot of diversity, so it's pretty safe. There is a bit of diversity, which you have to be careful of. But for the most part, there's not that much. So you can remain relatively safe. Honestly, ironically, this is a tangent, but I'm in Ukraine right now. There's a war in this country. It's safer right now, Kyiv, and I know a lot of you guys aren't going to believe me, because you could say, oh, a missile at any moment can come down. The odds of that, I don't know what those are. But Kyiv is safer than London. Kyiv is safer than Paris. Those countries have a lot more migrants and everything. Anyways, so it's actually safer in a war zone. You would think that the politicians in those countries would be more worried about the fact that their main cities are basically less safe than literal war zones. But anyways, I would say the best thing about Eastern Europe is that when you're comparing costs and everything like that, in Latin America, you have this more kind of like adventurous, lively, like in Colombia especially, there's so much greenery, the weather is nice, and there's also so many big booty Latinas walking around everywhere. You have fresh fruit, especially as a man, it makes your heart pump and thump, and you just feel so much life everywhere you are in those countries. I think it also makes you a little bit dumb. When your blood is always pumping all over the place and life is abounding and overflowing, that's where guys end up getting in stupid scenarios where they end up drugged or robbed because the blood has left their upper brain and it's gone somewhere else. So the style of life in a place like Eastern Europe is almost hilariously tame, I guess, because you have the memes about Eastern Europeans, about Slavic peoples in general, about how they're very expressionless and they have these kind of looking out at these buildings, which are relatively, these ones are quite pretty. Kyiv is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Krakow, a lot of these Eastern European cities are absolutely stunning. But then you come across the Soviet architecture, which can be imposing and a bit drab and reflective of the attitude and demeanor of the people. But I will say, I think that whole Ukrainian, like Slavic people being these like depressed humbugs who never smile, I think that's exaggerated. I think that is a thing that you come across when you're passing through places, like you're passing through shops, you're in certain places where people are working. When they're working, they don't have this bubbly persona. But once you meet the Slavs, once you meet the people that are here, they're not that like cold, I would say. They're honestly pretty warm. They're honestly happy and interested that you're here, and they're interested in talking to you. And I think a lot of that stuff can be really a bit exaggerated in my opinion. And in some ways, to the extent that it is true, I like it because I'm just used to people being a little more direct, and I really appreciate that about Slavs in general, is I think that they're pretty direct. I don't think they really hold back when they're thinking something and they want to say it. Versus in Latin America, the people there are just so unstable. And that's another thing in the culture. Here being Europe, things are, I think, relatively consistent. Some of these Eastern European countries can have a lot of corruption, but in Latin America, things will just literally not work. In Colombia and stuff like that, the buildings, like the building codes of them making stuff is just like shanty towns. People over generations piece things together to build a house up in the mountains, and then one flood comes in, it just swoops all away. A lot of the architecture, the way things are made, can be very reflective of this sort of general attitude, whereas being a European country, things just work pretty well here. The subways are clean, everything like that. Food-wise, not the best in Ukraine right now where I'm at, just gonna be honest, not a big fan. The borscht and stuff like that's good, it's like a soup. There's a few other things that are pretty good. Poland, in my opinion, has the best food just because I like eating a high-fat, high-protein diet. And Poland is the best for that because they have tons of sausages and meats and fats in all of their grocery stores. You can get it on literally every corner. It's also really easy to get raw milk. In Latin America, food is really good, in my opinion. Not so much for meat, for fruits and stuff like that. It's very good, very tasty. Colombia, not so much for meats. In Argentina, you obviously have like really good steaks and everything like that. I think in Latin America, I think it beats it on food just overall. There's just like a higher baseline. But at the same time, the whole beans and rice and arepas sort of meals can get pretty old in Latin America as well. So I think that honestly, long term, I think that I like the options in Eastern Europe maybe a little bit better, but I'm still getting my bearings here in Ukraine on where to get good food. And so then I think really lastly is the social scene and the dating scene and what it's like, the differences between Slavic girls and Latinas. Let's face it, 97% of you are guys. A lot of you guys will be like, oh, I'm traveling for the culture. And also, it's like, whatever. Dating is a part of your life and you want to understand the differences. A lot of the differences that I said about just the culture in general applies to what it's like dating. So Latina girls, they're very hot-blooded. They're very excited. They're very warm, and they're very warm very quickly. And there's a bit more instability overall with them. I see a lot of guys come up against, I have German buddies who go to Latin America and they're just like, this woman said she was going to meet at noon and now she is not here. And it's just been 15 minutes and she's on the way. Like, they do not understand that's a part of their culture. They're much less stable. They're much more flaky versus in Europe in general, people are just generally on time for things. When they say they're going to do something at a certain time, they're generally going to be there, and you can be more direct with making plans and stuff like that. They're both quite feminine. Slavic girl you can go to a Slavic girl, and if you approach her and you talk to her, she will just give you this stare, this Slavic stare for a while, not necessarily really say anything. But she might like you, but you think based off of her facial expression that she hates you. But if you just keep pushing and you just persist, if they're not saying goodbye or anything like that, then they are like, they'll still stand there and then they're still interested in you, but they give you this bitch face. Eventually there's a point where Slavic women, they have this hard outer shell, whereas Latinas are just open and warm and fuzzy from the get-go, but they're less stable, versus a Slavic girl who has a harder outer shell. But once you get past that hard outer shell, they're very sweet on the inside, and they can become really loyal, probably more so than Colombian girls or something like that. And once you get them to that point, then they're yours. Versus like in Argentina, this is something a lot of you guys don't know. Girls there aren't looking to date guys quickly. A girl can be in a situationship with you for 6 months, and they want to be in this because all of their friends do it, so they want to do the same. They want to be in a situationship for a while before you meet their family and everything like that. And they can drop you like that. They can just, if they just decide one day they meet another situationship, until you meet their family, they'll be really nice to you and act like they're your girlfriend. But I know a lot of guys where it's just the girl will just, they'll have an argument and then the situationship really meant nothing to them. Versus with a Slavic girl, I don't think they have as much of a weight thing that they're looking to get past when it comes to having a boyfriend if they like you. Once you have gotten past that point with them, they're yours. They're very much like, kind of like submitted to you and they're much more submissive. They really become yours after you have sex with them, to be honest. Sex doesn't mean as much in Latin America because I think everyone's just having sex with everyone down in Latin America. But here, I think girls are a bit more conservative and reserved in that regard. But once it does happen, it just means a little bit more. As far as physically, Slavic girls and white girls in general are very slender, tall, very pretty faces. The Slavic face, they'll have like very dull features. A lot of them will get lip filler. It's very common. Aside from that, I would say overall, the Slavic girls especially have very feminine bodies where it's slender, but they'll still have curves in the right places, versus Latin America where they're very curvaceous all over the place. The faces, in my opinion, in Latin America, aside from Argentina, guys aren't always going there for the faces. They're more so going for the rear artillery. I think that's pretty much it for this video. As a digital nomad, I think I've given you a lot from what you can look at from your perspective. If there's anything that I left out, leave a comment on this video and let me know what it is. I can answer you in the comments, and then I may make another video about it. For more personal questions, you could reach out to me on Instagram and I'll respond to you there. Thank you very much for watching this video, and peace.